I was just joking, Linda. One more gentle stab, and Mom won't leave her a cent. My mother's voice floated from the living room light as the clink of glasses on a festive night. Then came Amanda's laugh, my older sister. To the girl who's always sacrificing, always hoping, always waiting. I stood frozen at the threshold. The scent of cinnamon in the house, the twinkling Christmas lights, they were the same as every year. But I was no longer the daughter returning with hopes of an embrace. I was just a shadow accidentally wandering into what I once called home. My suitcase still sat in the hallway, my coat half draped over my shoulder. I hadn't knocked yet, hadn't smiled, hadn't shed a tear. They didn't know I was back. It didn't matter. I had heard enough. My name is Claire Delaney, 30 years old. Software engineer, living in New York, working since I was 21, paying off student loans, buying my first apartment at 28. I'm also the one who covered Dad's hospital bills when he had a heart attack, paid Amanda's final year of tuition, and built the entire cloud storage system for his company for free. I did it because I thought that's what family does for each other. And then I heard one more gentle stab. Some words don't need to be loud to pierce the heart. They seep in slowly like cold water soaking through a wet coat, creeping into every bone. I walked into the living room. They were sitting comfortably, each with a glass of wine, their eyes still sparkling from their recent laughter. I stood in the middle of the room, perfectly calm. "You're wrong, Mom," I said. That was all. They both turned. Mom blinked as if I were overreacting. Amanda raised an eyebrow, waiting for a scene. There was no scene. No tears. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and sat on the old wooden chair by the window. 10 minutes passed. No one followed. No one asked, "Are you okay?" or "I didn't know you heard." Just the ticking of the clock, and the silence of a house I once thought I belonged to. Old memories started creeping back uninvited. I remembered when Dad needed emergency dental work that insurance wouldn't cover. I withdrew $400 from my first savings fund. The next week, he told the church he'd earned extra to cover it. I sat in the back pew, unnoticed. I remembered when Amanda applied to study in Florence. Mom said they couldn't afford the tuition. I quietly transferred the money. When she told her fiancé, she said, "My parents sacrificed so much to send me." I remembered the time I offered to organize Christmas scheduling, cooking, hosting. Mom told Aunt Bernice Claire's not a leader. She doesn't have the knack for management. Then smiled as if stating an objective fact. I remembered Amanda's wedding. I was the maid of honor, but wasn't mentioned in the speeches. Not as a sister, not as a friend. Not as the one who paid for the rehearsal dinner. I didn't exist. I remembered Uncle Paul's funeral. I drove Grandma there, stayed overnight with her because she couldn't sleep. But I sat in the back row, the non-immediate family section. I remembered every detail as if someone were hammering nails into the door of my heart. Not with a heavy swing, but with slow, steady, smoldering taps. I wasn't angry, honestly. I just felt awake. Awake as if I'd stepped out of a dark room and realized I'd been in it too long. Awake like a survivor emerging from a trance I used to call family. I sat on the old chair watching the Christmas lights reflect on the glass of water in my hand. I opened my banking app. The balance was enough to live on for years. I closed the app, put my phone away, stood up and headed for the stairs. I didn't say goodnight. I didn't need to anymore. I slept at Grandma Evelyn's house in the guest room of her small wooden home 5 minutes away by car. The windows still had green floral curtains, the pillows smelled of lavender. No one was there but her and me. I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying Amanda's laugh. Always sacrificing, always hoping, always waiting. I used to think if I gave enough they'd see me. If I hoped long enough they'd love me the right way. If I was patient they'd come and say thank you. But they didn't come. And if I disappeared they'd tell the story in a way that suited them. I sat up at nearly 6 in the morning. Outside snow blanketed the porch. The kitchen light cast a golden glow on the wooden floor. I went downstairs. Grandma was awake. She sat at the dining table filling out a crossword pencil in hand. No makeup, silver hair neatly braided. One steady, weathered hand. She looked at me. No need to ask. No need to explain. "You heard, didn't you?" she asked. I nodded. Nothing more needed to be said. She didn't apologize for anyone. She didn't cry, didn't comfort. She just folded the newspaper, stood up, and walked to the coat closet. She pulled out her brown wool coat, the one she only wore on cold mornings when she meant business. Then she said, "Let's go." Where I asked. No questions, no chit-chat. Go. 18 minutes later, we were at the lawyer's office. A small glass room, wooden table, the air thick with the smell of paper and polished wood. Mrs. Delaney, the receptionist, nodded. Punctual as always. I didn't understand. Not until the lawyer handed me a folder and said, looking at me, "Just one signature." I froze. Not because of the amount, I hadn't even asked about the assets, but because of his eyes the first time someone looked at me as if I had worth. Not because I was convenient. Not because I was easy to manipulate. Not because I sacrificed. Simply because I deserved it. I signed. Not for the assets, but for the truth. For the first brick in building a wall between me and the years of being overlooked. 3 days later, the aftershocks began. But no one knew where the epicenter was. They only started feeling something was changing, and they couldn't imagine that the girl they thought would wait quietly forever had woken up and started taking everything back. 3 days after that fateful Christmas Eve, Grandma Evelyn said to me, "Let's go." No explanation, no preparation. She just wore the coffee brown wool coat I hadn't seen her use since last year, and she didn't look at me like a grandchild needing protection. She looked at me like someone ready to hear a truth and ready to face it. On the drive, we didn't talk. The car glided past snow-covered houses down the main street with the old French bakery where I'd applied for a job at 16. The scenery hadn't changed, but I had. For the first time, I sat behind the wheel without wondering if I was doing enough for my family. When the car stopped in front of the glass building, I turned to her. She just said, "Go in." No smile, no explanation, no gentle hand-holding. She just knew I needed to know. Her lawyer was Mr. Gerald, a black man in his 60s, his eyes serious, but not cold. When we walked in, he stood, shook my hand as if I weren't just the granddaughter tagging along. He knew who I was, and he knew why I was there. A folder lay neatly on the walnut table. "We need a signature," he said, his eyes not leaving mine. I opened the folder. The first line, "I, Evelyn Delaney, in full mental capacity, bequeath all my assets, real estate savings accounts, and personal property to my granddaughter Claire Delaney." I stopped. Everything slowed in my mind as if someone had drained the sound from the world. Not because of the amount, I hadn't even glanced at the valuation. I just read and reread the line, "My granddaughter Claire Delaney." For the first time, I wasn't an extension of someone else. Not Amanda's sister, not the girl who always steps up, not the one who helped and was forgotten. I was Claire, named clearly, by my own identity. I looked up at Grandma. She didn't cry, didn't smile. She said, very slowly, very clearly, "Not because you're perfect, but because you were always there when everyone else turned away." I don't know when I signed. My hand trembled slightly, but the signature was steady enough to mark a decision. Not for her. Not against them. For me. On the drive back, I realized my hands were still clenched in my lap. The cold outside wasn't enough to cut skin, but the cold inside was deeper. I thought about all the times I'd been pushed aside not by deliberate cruelty, but by silent neglect. It eroded me like a kind of mold. No one sees it, but it crumbles the structure within. I remembered Amanda's wedding, where I stood by her side through the ceremony, but wasn't mentioned in the speeches. Not as a sister. Not as a friend. Not as anyone. I remembered Uncle Paul's funeral, where I drove through the night to get Grandma there, waited at the hospital for 3 hours. But at the service I was seated in the back. Because this is for close family. I remembered last year's family meeting when Mom called all the grandchildren to discuss Grandma's estate. I wasn't invited. Later, she said, "I thought you were busy with work." I wasn't busy. They just didn't think to invite me. I was always there when something went wrong. I always quietly did the work no one wanted to claim. I always hoped. But no one looked at me long enough to see I was tired. That night I slept in my old room at Grandma's. The curtains were still the ones I picked at 17 snowflakes on a soft blue background. But I was no longer the 17-year-old studying under a yellow lamp. I was Claire, 30 years old, who had just signed a document affirming her worth. I opened my phone, went to the family documents folder. I looked at every transaction I'd made: hospital bills for Dad tuition, for Amanda shared property taxes, with Mom insurance paperwork. I read each line like I was reviewing the expenses of an organization, except this organization never saw me as a full member. I realized I wasn't exploited because they were evil. I was exploited because I didn't set boundaries. The next morning I poured coffee, sat watching the snow fall outside the window. Grandma wasn't up yet. Everything was peaceful, but in my mind, a plan was forming. Not loud, not dramatic, but clear, specific, step by step. I would take back everything I'd given, not because I was angry, but because I no longer wanted to be the support system. I was a person, and I would live like one, with boundaries, with value, with freedom. Before leaving Grandma's to return to New York, I stopped by the old house where Mom, Dad, and Amanda still lived, not to say goodbye, just to look one last time. I stood in the front yard, looking at the house where I'd helped fix the roof upgrade, the electrical system, install security cameras. No one knew, but I remembered every invoice. I didn't ring the bell. I just whispered a goodbye in my mind. Goodbye to the old role. Goodbye to silent sacrifice. Goodbye to the girl they only turned to when they needed help and forgot when the party was over. I turned away. In my coat pocket, a copy of the will rested in its leather folder. A handwritten note from Grandma was clipped to it. "You don't owe anyone anything. Not anymore." I smiled, lightly, not out of happiness, but because finally I saw myself. 3 days later, I logged into the phone carrier account, where I'd been paying the family plan for Mom, Dad, and Amanda. I didn't cancel. I just clicked transfer ownership. They had 3 days to enter their own payment information. No texts, no notes, no explanations. Just pay for yourselves now. And that was just the first step. Every time they needed me, I showed up. Every time there was a crisis, I was the first call. But they never thought to thank me, because they saw me as the system, the living infrastructure, invisible, reliable, needing no acknowledgement. A week after the lawyer's visit, I began unraveling the threads I'd unwittingly wrapped around their lives. No more guilt. No more wondering if I was doing the right thing. There's a peace that comes when you stop proving, stop saving, stop hoping others will change. I no longer wanted to be understood. I just wanted to be free. I logged into the phone carrier account, where I'd paid the full family bill for 5 years. I opened the family plan section, which included 4 numbers: mine, Mom's, Dad's, Amanda's. I didn't cancel. I didn't cut service. I just transferred ownership. Each got a notification. This number is no longer part of the group payment plan. Please update payment information within 72 hours to avoid service disruption. No warning text, no call, no goodbye. Just one line. Start paying for yourselves. Day 2. I accessed the business Dropbox account, where I'd stored all of Dad's documents for free, from tax filings to insurance contracts, family photos, temporary wills. He never knew I used a premium account costing $120 a month. It was just Claire took care of it. I revoked access to each folder. That night, Mom was logged out while looking at San Diego vacation photos. Amanda called me at 2 a.m., not to ask why, just to blame. What did you do to my data? The entire wedding folder is gone. I looked at the blinking phone screen, then let it be. I didn't answer. Day 3. I removed all devices from the Amazon Prime account they used to order groceries, birthday gifts, monthly vitamins. I didn't lock the account. I just removed emails that weren't mine. Each got a notification. Your account is no longer part of the Prime Family program. Please subscribe individually to continue services. Amanda left a snarky comment on Instagram. Some people think cutting support is freedom. It's just organized loneliness, with a black heart emoji. I didn't respond. I just blocked. Not out of anger, but because I didn't want to witness someone else crafting a distorted version of me on a stage they wrote and directed. Day 4. I called the bank where I'd co-signed for Mom and Dad's mortgage refinance. They hadn't qualified without me as a second signer. I'd signed with all trust and responsibility. No conditions. "Hello, I'd like to remove my name from the loan agreement," I said clearly to the agent Janet. She paused. "I remember you. You helped me recover my wedding photos after a software crash last year. I owe you big." I just smiled. This time, I need to help myself. Janet spoke to her supervisor, then returned after 10 minutes. "We'll start the process to reassess the loan conditions. If your parents don't qualify independently, they'll need to restructure the loan." I understand, and I agree. The next day, my parents got a notice from the bank. Due to changes in the loan agreement, the current interest rate will be reassessed. I didn't warn them. I didn't need to. Because they never asked me when they added my name to the property tax payments without permission. Day 5. I canceled other shared subscriptions: accounting software, VPN, digital photo, storage, security camera, management software, the one I'd installed for them 3 years ago. That night, Mom called 4 times. I didn't answer. Dad sent a 1-line email. "Claire, the house internet is down. What are you doing?" I didn't reply. Because the only thing I was doing was stopping doing everything. I printed a full list of shared accounts, every payment I'd covered, every service they'd relied on. It was all in a clear, precise, unemotional spreadsheet. I put it in an envelope, sealed it, and left it at their front door. On the outside, I wrote, "Everything you used, it's yours now. Handle it yourselves. Claire, I didn't sign as family. I signed as an individual, unbound, unowed." Day 6. The messages changed tone. From blame to attack. "Mom, no one in this house understands what you're thinking. Are you destroying everything just for attention, Amanda? I hope you're happy turning into the one who pulls the plug on the whole family. But don't worry, you were never the center. I read them all. Didn't reply. They weren't hurting because they lost me. They were hurting because they lost what I provided." By the end of the week, someone in the family started telling friends, neighbors, the church that I was going through a crisis, that Claire has mental issues, that we're trying to help her. I didn't argue, didn't go online to correct them, didn't make a public post like they did, because I knew once you stand up and cut the ties binding, you people will call it rebellion. But the only rebellion I committed was reclaiming my life. Sunday evening, I sat alone in my New York apartment. Small, tidy, quiet. No more phone pings, no more family group notifications, no more "Claire, help with this." "Claire, I forgot my password." "Claire, can you—" I opened my laptop, created a new folder. Rebuild plan. For the first time, I wrote a plan with no one's name but mine. Not for anyone. Not against anyone. Not needing anyone's validation. Just, I will live as a free person. From here. The next week, I'd start the process of removing my name from the co-signed loan with my parents, step by step, signature by signature. It would take time. But I wasn't in a hurry. Because for someone who'd been turned into a resource, every step toward reclaiming personhood was a form of recovery. And when they started seeing the system collapse without knowing why, I was ready for the next step. They lost the house on a rainy Wednesday afternoon, according to Marjorie, the old neighbor. She called me no preamble. "Claire, your mom's packing up." The bank foreclosed on the house. I saw a moving truck out front. I stood still in my kitchen, holding the mug of peppermint tea I'd just poured. The water was still hot, but my heart wasn't angry, nor triumphant. I didn't feel victory, just a settling. Like an invisible thread had just been cut. I once thought if the day came when they lost everything, I'd feel relieved. But the real feeling was different, not satisfaction. Not pain, just an undeniable silence. They were in the place I once stood, where no one saves, no one understands, no one listens. And unlike me back then, they weren't used to living there. 3 days later, I drove back to town. No blizzard this time, no holiday season. Just early February, gray and damp with patchy lawns wet from rain and wooden fences bending in the cold wind. I parked in front of the motel on Route 7, the kind with small rooms, thin carpets, flickering lights. I walked into the lobby. The desk clerk eyed me warily, but when I said Delaney, he nodded, pointing to room 204. "They're there. Checked in 3 days ago." I knocked, inside dragging footsteps, then the click of a lock. Mom opened the door. Her eyes were shadowed hair, disheveled, old sweater crumpled. No Claire. No, you're here. No clear expression. Dad stood behind her, not looking at me. Amanda wasn't there. Maybe she was avoiding me. Or maybe she just thought I wasn't worth facing. I stepped inside almost out of an old habit that hadn't fully died. The room was small, smelling of damp and cheap conditioner. A half-open suitcase, clothes in disarray. On the table, a stack of papers, bank letters, eviction notices, overdue payment alerts. I didn't sit. I stood straight. My voice wasn't soft, but it wasn't cold. I'm not here to argue. Both stayed silent. I'm here to set terms. If you need help, 3 conditions. Dad frowned as if he still didn't grasp that the person standing before him wasn't yesterday's Claire. I held up 3 fingers. 1. Any help comes with a contract. Clear, transparent, signed with copies. No one gets to rewrite the story. I don't need your money, Mom said softly, but her voice lacked conviction. She said it because she felt she had to. I ignored it. 2. No twisting the truth. Not to neighbors, not to the church, not to relatives. If I help the story as Claire helped us. Not, we managed, but she insisted. Not, we didn't need it, she's overreacting. Got it. Dad looked at me for a long time. A flicker of anger passed, then swallowed back. 3. No emotional strings. I'm not coming back as the good daughter, not joining for dinner, not sharing work stories. I help because I choose to, not because I owe anyone. I looked straight into Mom's eyes. No forced feelings. No talk of blood ties. No pretending we're close. I'm not returning to being the Claire you treated as invisible. Mom didn't answer. She looked down at the floor. A small gesture, but I understood it better than any words. It wasn't agreement, nor remorse. It was acceptance. The next day I contacted a small local real estate office asking them to find my parents a suitable rental single-story, 2 bedrooms near the market and hospital affordable. I paid the first 3 months' deposit. I sent the contract via email, CCing Mom, Dad, and the law office. Every term was clear, legally binding, not a single line about family. I didn't stay. I didn't go see the new house with them. I left the keys at the real estate office and made it clear they move in when they want. I won't be there. Before leaving town, I stopped by the old bakery. The new owner had changed the sign, but the oven still filled the air with the smell of waffles like when I was a teenager working there. I bought a small pastry, sat by the window. I didn't cry. I just looked out at the road leading to the old house, where I once thought I had to stay to help, to be worthy, to be accepted. I used to think if I walked away I'd feel empty, but I didn't. I just felt light. That afternoon, as I prepared to leave town, I got a text from Amanda. Not a thank you, not an I'm sorry. Just got it. We'll handle it from here. No exclamation point. No emoji. No emotion. I didn't reply, not out of disdain, but because I'd said enough. And sometimes silence is the only way to keep your heart from turning back. As I drove out of town, a light rain began. The drops clung to the windshield like a thin veil between me and the past. Mom didn't say thank you. Amanda turned away. I left in silence. But unlike before this time, I wasn't in pain. I just survived. And in my heart, I knew the hardest part was over. But the most defining part, the part that spoke my truth, who I am, was still ahead. I'd pulled the plug. Now it was time for them and the world to see what remained when the one behind the system stepped into the light. I heard the first rumor at a small Brooklyn coffee shop a few blocks from my apartment. An old acquaintance from the church in town, the assistant pastor's wife, spotted me while I waited for A to go coffee. "Claire," she said, tilting her head, "we're still praying for you. I heard you're going through a tough time." I smiled politely, but my heart skipped a cold beat. Tough time I hadn't told anyone I was struggling. I was still working, still healthy, still living quietly. I didn't understand. Until she continued gently, "Your mom's so worried. She said you're having a mental breakdown, that you've cut off the family and refused to see anyone for a month." I stood still. The coffee in my hand was cooling. In my mind, a quiet truth emerged. They weren't just cutting me out of their lives. They were building a different story in public. And in that story, I wasn't the sane one. I was the unstable one. I drove home in silence. No music, no podcast. Just the sound of wind through the window. Mom wasn't just telling lies. She was redesigning the whole picture and painting me with distorted strokes. Amanda stayed quiet on social media, but posted cryptic statuses. When people are hurt, they often hurt others. Accompanied by a photo of a woman staring out a window, eyes distant. And I, the one who'd withdrawn all support, became the villain in the family story. No need for debate. They just spread the right kind of misinformation in the right places. I didn't want to fight in the dark. I wanted light. So on Tuesday night, I opened my laptop and wrote an email to the church council, where my family attended. Subject: request for correction. Personal information regarding Claire Delaney. I wrote concisely, unemotionally, without accusation. Dear Council, I am writing to clarify recent information circulating within the church community regarding my mental state and family relationships. Let me state clearly I am fully healthy with no mental health crisis. My separation from my family stems from years of unfair treatment, lack of acknowledgement, and abuse of trust. Attached to this email are a notarized copy of the amended will by my grandmother, Evelyn Delaney. Screenshots of threatening messages from my mother and sister, including, "We'll sue if you don't change the will." A spreadsheet of financial contributions I made over the past 7 years, including tuition, medical bills, mortgage loans, and family services. I am not seeking an apology. I only request that the council refrain from spreading false information that harms my reputation. Sincerely, Claire Delaney. I attached 3 PDFs clearly named will, notarized confirmation, threatening messages, financial contributions, Claire D. My hand didn't shake. I wasn't angry. I was just clear. 3 days later, I received a reply from the head pastor's office. The first line read, "Thank you. We consider the matter closed. The truth is clear. No defense, no excuses, no offer to discuss further. Just they read, they understood, they went silent." And that was enough. After that, I went to Dad's company website, a small accounting firm he ran. Where I'd built the cybersecurity system, updated software, designed the portfolio page. The clients and technical support section still read, "Thank you to Claire Delaney, technical expert and longtime supporter of the firm." I deleted it. In its place, I wrote, "Collaboration ceased as of January, due to unauthorized use of personal support and misrepresentation of partnership. No further explanation needed." Silence sometimes speaks louder than any speech. A few hours later, Dad called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Claire, you can't do this. This is defamation." I didn't reply, because I wasn't defaming. I was showing them I have a voice. That evening, I got a text from Amanda. "If you don't change the will, I'll sue. I'll bury you in paperwork." I didn't respond. I just forwarded the text to Grandma Evelyn's lawyer. He replied an hour later, "Good. The more evidence, the easier to protect the assets. Don't worry." 2 weeks later, Grandma Evelyn passed away. No illness, no accident. She just closed her eyes one March morning after finishing her daily crossword as always. I went to the nursing home carrying a basket of jasmine flowers. She was still warm, her face serene, as if everything she needed to do was done. On the table beside her was a sealed envelope with my name. I opened it when I got home. Inside was the final version of the will. The last paragraph read, "I, Evelyn Delaney, leave all my assets to my granddaughter, Claire Delaney, the only one who deserves it for her silent loyalty, unconditional kindness, and courage to live as herself. Not beloved granddaughter. Not the one who cared for me most. Just deserving. No embellishment. No obligation. Just seen. Acknowledged. Fair." I read it, folded the paper, and placed it in a box. That night, I lit a small candle by the window. I didn't cry. I just watched the tiny flame flicker and thought of a woman who lived to the end with clear eyes, despite a world full of noise and falsehoods. I realized I didn't need to win. I just needed to be true. And now, with the truth standing firm, it was time to build something new from it. Not a wall, but a place where people like me could survive and truly live. I never thought freedom would smell like fresh ink. The first contract for the Quiet Rebuild Fund was bound neatly printed on thick, heavy paper. I flipped to the first page, seeing my name as the legal representative, not under anyone else's name. Not daughter of, not sister of, not representing anyone else. Just me. And below it, the mission financial and legal support for adults rebuilding their lives after trauma caused by their own families. The fund had no launch event, no TV speech, no Facebook post. I didn't want people like me to have to go public to be recognized as victims. I just wanted them to have a place to start again in silence, in clarity, in dignity. I named it the Quiet Rebuild Fund. Not because I wanted to hide, but because I understood the greatest truths don't need to be shouted. A week after Grandma Evelyn's will was made public, my sister texted Hope, "You're happy." Just 6 words. No question mark, no emoji, no apology, but also no more threats. As if something in her had broken permanently or had fallen to a level that couldn't hurt me anymore. I didn't reply, not out of disdain, but because I understood this time, silence wasn't a weapon. Silence was a boundary. I didn't hate Amanda. I just wouldn't let her keep playing the protagonist in my life story. 10 days later they came. It was a Saturday morning, and I was watering plants on my balcony. My small apartment overlooked a park where kids rode bikes and elderly people walked with paper coffee cups. I saw them through the doorbell camera. Mom in a gray coat, a tattered knit scarf around her neck. Dad behind her, more hunched than I remembered. Amanda wasn't with them. Maybe she knew this meeting wasn't for her. I let them stand at the door for nearly 2 minutes before stepping out. They looked at me as if standing before a threshold, not just physical, but mental, historical, confronting themselves. Mom spoke first, her voice hoarse and trembling. "We just want to talk." I didn't invite them in. I stood in the doorway, morning light hitting half my face, the other half still in shadow. "You didn't lose Grandma," I said slowly, each word clear. "You lost me. No drama, no shouting. I didn't need to raise my voice. Truth, when spoken at the right moment, carries its own weight." Dad looked at me for the first time without anger, without trying to hold on to toughness. Just eyes reddened by something gone that couldn't be reclaimed. "This isn't punishment," I continued. "This is clarity." I didn't let them respond. I stepped back, hand on the door. Then I closed it. Gently. No sound. No slam. No loud lock like in the movies. Just a door closed. And an old chapter shut. That evening, Maya, my best friend from college, came over for dinner. She sat on the couch holding a glass of red wine and didn't ask right away. She always knew how to wait. When we were nearly done eating, she set her chopsticks down, tilted her head. "You okay?" I nodded, then paused. Finally, I looked out the window where streetlights cast long shadows on the sidewalk and said, "Not happiness, but freedom." And for me, that's enough. I didn't need them to come back. Didn't need a late apology. Didn't need social media to validate I was right. Didn't need the church to correct rumors. Didn't need anyone to see me as noble for forgiving. I just needed to know from now on everything I build is by my choice. Everyone I keep close is someone who doesn't need convincing that I deserve respect. I used to think I had to win, had to prove, had to be seen. Now I don't. I don't live for them to understand me. I live because I understand myself. And that finally is the healing. My story isn't about revenge, but about choice, choosing to stand up, choosing to break free from trauma, choosing to live true to my own value. I've learned that not everyone called family deserves unconditional love. And forgiveness doesn't always mean returning. Sometimes it's how you move forward without resentment. I share this story not for sympathy, but to reach those who've been overlooked, hurt by their own kin. You are not alone. You have the right to set boundaries. The right to live without carrying anyone else but yourself. If this story touches something in your heart, leave a comment, share your thoughts, or simply follow to join me in the stories to come. Because sometimes just one honest word can be a foothold for someone learning to step out of the dark. Thank you for listening.